That's fine. Okay, so this is with HR, and I'm sure she's listening, so she'll be on her way. And the executive session is for performance of a public employee. We're asking for 10 minutes, and I'll try to keep it shorter. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, back from executive session, no actions. Jessica, do you have something for us?
Yes, Jessica Warren, Human Resources. I have a request from Public Works. They're requesting to reclassify their finance manager position, which is currently vacant, to the Public Works Admin Services Supervisor and fill that position. And then also change their buyer position, which is filled, to a purchasing supervisor position, which will give that position a 5% pay increase.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so we'll go ahead and move forward with our current agenda unless the board would like to say otherwise. Okay. So our agenda today is pretty short. We do have some items to discuss, which the first one is actually Sean. Susan sat down. He's going to talk about the telecommunications conditions of approval, which is one of his items that he brought with Public Works over to OFM.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Sean Roy, Finance Director. I believe you were passed out a copy of this memo, we'll call it, from the board. This should be your second time seeing this. I believe a few weeks ago we talked about it briefly. So the purpose of this document is to kind of provide the, the who, what, when, where, and how for cell towers and telecommunication items attached to our buildings or on our properties. We're coming into the season of renewing or renegotiating some of our leases for these towers. And so we wanted to have a strong document with our position on the entry and how the design and such things are going to be done moving forward.
Just for a brief explanation for the public as well, pretty much anything that's on top of our buildings, we do try to get lease agreements going for. Historically, that hasn't always been the case, but as you're looking at the Hall of Justice or this building as well, you'll see a lot of those towers. Those are normally cell phone towers. We have one of the highest points in the area to offer service. And so this will lay some of that groundwork.
So this brings uniformity to not only the agreement, but the physical installment and what it's supposed to be on the buildings.
Yeah, it'll bring uniformity to how they access the buildings, the timing of that. Currently, some of those agreements allow 24/7 access. Those do need to be have a person with them when they access certain areas of the building. As they propose designs or changes to those, we'll get the schematics associated with it so we can see if it aligns with our building plans, power, and other things of that nature, maybe internet to feed those towers. So if the board, oh, go ahead.
So is this something that we currently have and we're just changing some of the verbiage on, or did we not have anything like this to begin with?
Currently, they're all ruled by their own independent contracts. We do not have something similar to this on the books. This would be a new item.
Is there a cell tower on this building?
There used to be network towers for 911. Those have been removed since then. Currently, there's nothing on this building. The Hall of Justice does have 2 cell towers, some 911 towers, and then ham radio as well. And then we also have some standalone towers on our properties.
And so if one of those cell towers goes down in the middle of the night, they've got some way to access that if they want to get up there and fix it at 1 in the morning?
They do not have keys to the building, no.
No. They have to go through our facilities team to do that.
So the service would be down until such time as they could get through the process of getting approval to get up there?
It would be spotty. I don't know if the whole, the whole area would be down, but it would, yeah, there'd be some missed service in that area.
But currently, they would still have to gain access through our facilities team to do anything. This just lays out that communication lines better on how that process goes.
Okay.
quick side note, because I know you guys are aware of this. We have a theory that one of the small satellites up on this building's roof is the culprit of our cracked atrium window, actually. So that's what we think. We don't know. So
It
anyways,
has been removed.
Wait,
it
wait,
has
wait,
been
wait.
removed.
Say
but
that again, you think what?
a small satellite that was above the atrium that is cracked, that we've been working on a solution, an engineering solution for. We believe it was caused by a small satellite that was mounted above it. So just the more you know. So when will we expect to have this in front of the board if they are okay to move forward?
Yeah, so we bring it back formally and it would be reviewed and approved by the board, just an open session like this. It's not an official policy of the county. This would be a departmental policy as we move forward.
Would you consider more like a template to, okay.
Yeah, it'll be referenced in our contracts moving forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I know Susan has some road property updates.
So good afternoon, Susan Eugenius. I have property acquisition documentation for two of our projects. The first one is for the Sweet Birch storm sewer, the emergency repair that we did in the fall. This is just closing up the loop. When we did the process, we got a possession and use from the property owner. We completed the appraisals, laid out the easement, and they have agreed to it. So they have signed off on that document, and it's just the last part of that project. And then the other two that I have, one is they're both related to the Shadow Mountain project. One is the actual purchase of the site for the reservoir, and then the other is the easement for the water coming from our lower reservoir up to the site. So I'm asking permission for the chairman to sign these three documents.
I'm okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have from Public Works unless the
It-
board has other items.
This completes everything on Birch,
This is the last item on Sweet Birch, yes.
and the guy's okay now?
The storm drain has been relocated and this buttons up our property side piece of it. The other items are still being discussed, I think.
Oh,
Through risk. The repairs have been made, and this makes the easement official because we relocated it to the adjacent property. So this was getting the easements from that property owner.
okay.
And we did that fairly quickly from the time we got approval on that easement to move it, right? I mean, it was
Yes, we
quick.
did.
Yeah, good job on that.
That's
Okay.
what we have. And that completes our items.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gina?
Good afternoon, Gina James, Health and Human Services. We have Community House on Broadway here today. They came before the holidays and shared some information about some projects they had in mind and some funding requests. They are coming back today to just give some updates on those items and maybe some information about their annual report. So I'll invite them up and share. You guys.
Hello, how you guys doing?
Good.
Good, good. So, wanted to go over, the reason we're here today is we had those three proposals prior. And I think it was back in December, wasn't it? Or it was, yeah, it was, yep. And so long story short, we had a good December. I mean, the best holiday giving we've ever had. And so as we go through this book right here, you'll see the annual report. First few pages are just summaries, but then there's a recap of some numerical stuff. But when we get back to page 9 and 10, 10 has our financial breakdown here of revenue and expenses. And we ended up out of the 3.3 million 75 on the revenue and 3.1 on the expenses. And we actually cleared 243,000, which was kind of ironic. You know, it was like a nip and tuck year, so that we came out ahead. We were running behind probably around 13,000 a month, it seemed. But usually our funding comes in during the CARES campaign. And then that gets us through to October, and then October, November, December, we finally start getting some funds in again. And we just had the best year we've ever had. And so with that, I backed out a lot of the requests. The one that I had that we thought, oh, you know what, the 18 to 25-year-olds, the hotel, you know, the transitional living. Honestly, I'm tuckered out. You know, we've done a lot of stuff, and I'd rather not take that step because it's only, from what I understand, the funding for the Consolidated Homeless Grant expires July 2027. Is that correct? I think it is. Gina said, yeah. And so with that in mind, there's no reason to run a pilot project that short of time, because by the time you get it started, you know, we're talking just a 1 year, and you're not going to see the results clear enough to see if it was effective. And so that's really a 2 or 3 year pilot project we were thinking about. But since that season has passed, I've tossed that aside and decided not to pursue that. The one that we did want to pursue, well, also too, Best Place, since we came out ahead, Best Place, we don't need the funding. We were coming up behind, but I do want you to look at this. So when you go to the page 10 in this book here, when you look at the breakdown of our revenue, you could see that contributions was 33%, which that was about $1 million. You know, that was really the highest we've ever had. And I think people largely were driven by the popularity of seeing that the youth are being taken care of. So thank you for making that decision. I know it was kind of a tough one for you guys to make, but it was definitely something that resonates with the community. I'll show you a few other things that show that. But look at, so the contributions for individuals was 33%. Facility leasing. Now grants was only 3%, so that's really low. But we're not a big grant seeker, and I'll show you why. Facility leasing, we've been able to fortunately have a number of facilities that are paid off, but we can lease portions of it to subsidize community house, such as the place from Best Place. We've got Mackin's Auto Body and Core Health that leases sites from them, from community house. The original building from the doctors, that entire building was given to community house. Core Health rents that out from community house, as well as we've got the chess, which is really, originally we bought it with Core Health money, but we had a strange deal go on where we had requested for some funds. The funds gave it to community house, so we had to literally turn it over to community house in order to get those funds. So Dave Nelson, attorney, judge, he helped us with that matter to figure that out. So there's a site there also leased. So all that to say is 15% of our funding comes from that. 18% comes from service and contracts. In 2015 and 16, there was this, does it help people's behavioral health if they have jobs and housing? Does it contribute and help them with their mental health? And I think it was the 1115 waiver, if I remember right. And they ran it for 2 or 3 years and they said, yeah, it does actually. But it's only when you actually require services to be had. That's the only way it comes out. So long story short, they have Medicaid gives community-based organizations, CBOs, opportunity to bill Medicaid, not as a behavioral health agency, but as a community-based organization. So Community House actually gets to bill Medicaid for the supportive housing, supportive employment. And so that helps subsidize, obviously, our income. And then lastly, you'll see the support from Core Health. Core Health, I started Core Health for Community House specifically because it was chaotic when I got there in 2012. So when I started that, we were cost plus 2% for the first, goodness, like from 2015 through 2020. And then the BHO disbanded, and then we went to the MCOs. And I remember the first month, April of 2020, I think it was 2021, we lost 30,000. So we thought, oh no, this is going to be tough. But actually, we've got such a creative model because you've got the captive audience. You've got a majority of the people there that are there for, they need mental health. They need chemical dependency counseling. And it's a no-brainer. And I remember what was Tim Kruger? Tim Kruger. He was ombudsman. And I remember it was kind of funny when I started, because the first 2 or 3 years, people were saying, oh, they're forcing us to do this. They're forcing us to do this. And so Tim Kruger would get these complaints called by the health department. And eventually he just said, to tell you the truth, guys, if you don't have a car to drive down to the 748 14th Avenue site and they're going to watch your kids for you and you can have your appointment while you're having that and they're letting you to stay here for free, why wouldn't you have your appointment here? So it ends up being close to about 90%, 85 to 90%, I would say, get their services at Core Health. But some people, they come from other organizations and that's fine until they slip up. And if they slip up, that means maybe they're doing that to either they've got a preferred provider or they're not really being effective with what they're doing. So all that to say is we say, if you want to stay with us, you can't keep using, you're going to have to switch to Core. Otherwise, you got to move out. And that's only when it fails. Other than that, people do have the choice. But so you can see how our funding has been diversified since 2012 to current, which makes me happy because I can retire in a few years and know that we're going to be strong and survive and be strengthened. This statistics sheet here shows all the stats. You could look at them and question us about them and stuff. But one thing's notable here too is the CPS cases doubled in a year. So we went from 20 to 40 or 20 to 39. And so CPS, Beth's Place is, and Community House is helping out CPS as well as juvenile detention, in a big way. But this is the other part when I wanted to say, it really shows that it resonated with the community because look at the back pages here, 14 and 15. You've got all of these organizations, businesses, and churches and whatever. And this isn't even all the groups that do cooking as well, but that's a lot of organizations that.
Frank, let me cut you off real quick. Did you provide that to us earlier? Where can we get those?
No, you have them. Oh, you haven't been looking at them?
We don't have them.
Oh, Kelly's got them. I thought she gave them to you. Goodness gracious. I was telling you those page numbers because I thought you had them. Well, I'm not going to start over,
No,
but
don't do that.
I think you guys can look through it and you got some questions to that? Because I just have one request for you today. And then we are offering you up the audit from, what is it, Baker Tilly. It used to be Moss Adams. And so 2 years ago, Community House on Broadway, we have contracted our accounting through Chase and Spurgeon, then it went to the Future Group. Now it's us, Opsel Dawson. So Opsel Dawson now is the head of it. Dave Future and Dave Spurgeon. Dave Spurgeon's retired. We want to make sure the books look good. We've never received more than, gosh, I don't think more than 250. What was the year we did the CCBHC? Jordan? Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, Community House on Broadway is not received to the level of federal funding to trigger a single audit process.
But we decided since
But
Spurgeon and those guys are retiring,
Yeah.
I want it clean.
Right. Yeah, so we started the audit process 2 years ago. So in 2025, we underwent a internal controls review audit, which the results of that, the letter to the board has been provided to you in the packet. And then we've been building on those insights and results, and then have contracted, gosh, I think it was in September, October, we contracted obviously for this year, 2026 fiscal year, to audit the 2025 books, go through the normal audit and financial statements compilation.
Yeah. And in the past, we really, didn't really have the excess funding to do that, but Core Health has, the way Dave Nelson, our lawyer, has written it up. And maybe you could talk about the partnership and how legal beagle it is, because we wanted to make sure everything's above board.
Right, so working with council and then also working with Baker Tilly, looking at specifically the interconnectedness of the two nonprofit organizations, right? So Community House on Broadway and then Core Health being two separate entities, both organized as 501c3 nonprofits, sharing a common mission, and then looking at ensuring that the support of one to the other is obviously above board and in line with IRS and legal regulations.
You said
yes,
something
sir.
that if you could please restate it. You said you don't receive some sort of federal funding that triggers a specific type of audit. Could you say that again?
Yeah,
I think it's 750,000,
it's like,
isn't it?
and it recently changed to like 750 or up to $1 million. It's a threshold number of direct federal funding that triggers what's called a single audit, or I think
Gina,
maybe in the
Yeah.
past they called it a yellow book audit.
Maybe, yeah, if you receive.
So we haven't reached that
Mhm.
threshold at Community House on Broadway or at Core Health.
Yeah, so if you receive X amount of dollars in federal funding, then federal requirements require you to have a federal single audit each year. So there are some organizations that receive a high amount of federal funding and they would be required to do that federal single audit as part of that if they meet that funding threshold. I think it is 750,000
Yeah, I think
annually or
so.
something like that.
750 is what it is now. What was it before?
Well, I think it went from 500 to 750 and we've just never reached that. So, and neither do we want to.
Yeah, and that's specific to federal funding. If you receive that amount of federal funding, then there's federal requirements for you to do that single audit.
So like Medicaid, we get Medicaid dollars for Core Health. Those aren't federal funding. Those are through the state.
So you're saying that in lieu of that audit, because you haven't met that threshold, you're instituting an audit on. your
Yeah,
end?
on our
Yes,
own.
so
Yeah, yeah,
internally,
yeah.
under the board's direction and obviously to look at our own books, that's the process that we've undertaken.
Yeah. And so all that to say is, all we've got is one request today. And it's the TBRA assistance. And it's $50,000. There is, Nora, where's that other sheet here that shows the history? Do they have the history?
Yeah.
Do you guys show them it, Jordan? So you got one with the
And it
green
has a
logo there?
community house
So
logo.
that shows the history of TBRA funding that we would get through the city of Longview. And in 2025, we didn't get any, is that correct? I think we're down to like 10,000 or less. And so they weren't able to give any this year because of the encampment. So.
So is this subsidized housing that you're?
It's,
what
yeah,
does this total
what
represent?
the agreement we had with the city of Longview is that people would go through community house and they'd have to do the chemical dependency. Adam Trimble helped us set it up, actually. And I think he works for you guys now, doesn't he? I think he works for the, okay. So anyhow, we made an agreement where we make sure that they are good landlord tenants. And we don't want to put anyone out there that's going to stain or tarnish our name. And neither do we want that money used for the city to be going out that way because, you know, you can look right here on page, look on page 6 in this book. On page 6, you'll see the number of landlords that we work with. And the only reason they work with us is because we do try to make sure that people are clean and sober approach. And we're not gonna, one of the leverages we have is we could say, if you're not paying your lease, if you're tearing up the place, you gotta move out. And we help the landlords by saying they could come back into community house. If they refuse, they might not be able to come back into community house in the future. You know, they'll be red flagged. So we do have some leverage because people are coming in to live for free. And when people voluntarily come into you to say, I want to be a part of your program, Dr. Maherg, Stephen Maherg, as well as Mark Bollinger, I've asked them before, I said, can you mandate an assessment when they come in? And he said, absolutely. Because they're saying, I need your help. And so they voluntarily come in. And so this amount of landlords that work with us, and here's the, look in the page before, you see the number of employers that employ residents from community house on page 5. All these systems are built up to be around people that are, you know, clean and sober approach. Now, that page that you held up, Jordan, why don't you go through that real quick? I think it was like 35 total. On the back, it said 35 total. And how many failed in that 35?
Yes, so since reviewing our participants in the TBRA program that we've been running since 2022, we've had 35 households participate in the program. Over the 4-year time horizon, we spent assisted them with $97,000 in rental assistance. It is time-based rental assistance, and it is also income-based program. Out of those 35 families, when we look back through the data, 3 of those families ended up not being successful on the program. So it had a very high success rate in getting folks into permanent housing and supporting them in that process. And really key to kind of the TBRA model is being able to walk alongside them and continue to provide those wraparound services. So when they're in community house on Broadway, as Frank shared, they work with an employment specialist, but also with a housing specialist, right? To be able to move out of the community house and into stable housing for their household family on their own. Those services continue with them when they move out. And that's one of the things that we're able to do with the TBRA tool. And it, you know, 35 families out of a 4-year time horizon. So it's not every family that's utilizing this tool, but it is one tool in the toolbox. And as families utilize this tool, we are able to really require that we walk alongside them with their housing specialists through that time to ensure that they're maintaining the best we can, help them maintain that stable housing. And we do believe that a review of the participants that have utilized this program have had a very high success rate.
On this, so that you know, on this page here, I apologize for flipping so many pages, but this annual report, this 2-page annual report, one of the things I want to point out is the recidivism rate. When I started at Community House, I have no idea what the recidivism rate was. It might have been 15%, 20%. I have no clue. I told Melissa Taylor when I first started, I said, it's going to take about 2 or 3 years just to find the numbers I trust. But, we've been doing this for quite a few years and we go through painstaking measures to make sure. But now this is the resident return rate. This doesn't include Chess, but it includes Community House. And so you'll see 22 singles or individuals returned, which is 5% recidivism rate. And the families, only 2 families returned, that's 2%. And so that tells me that people, they know when they come back, they're gonna have to do the work. And so, and the whole thing is, are they ready for recovery? And that's really when people, besides getting into episodal situations, they're gonna have to develop those tools, and a lot of them come through strong faith. We just had 2 kids baptized. Here's the way of the world. We had 2 kids baptized last week, and one of them got kicked out yesterday. I'm like, geez, freak. But, it planted the seed because we got Young Life at Ascent. And so the kids at Best Place, about half of them are going to Young Life every other Monday at Ascent. And then I think they're going to Renewal City Church. That's where the kids got baptized the other day. But to get right back down to it, the SBAR, Gina had us do an SBAR for the request. And so it's 50,000. We're figuring 50,000 because we were going to say 33,000, but it's a little bit over a year and a half, right? And so when we figure we can spend down about 50,000, and that would keep those that are ready to move out, and then it creates more room for those that need the help to start from ground zero, because we are going to continue to serve those families. We don't want them back. We want them to get this done and done right the first time. Yeah.
So Frank, let me go back to my original question. The average cost per month per household, is that cost a subsidy or is that the cost of the housing unit itself?
Which page are you looking
On
at?
the tib right here.
Okay, that one there.
Yeah.
Jordan, go ahead.
So-
Yeah, that's the cost of the subsidy. So it's not, that's not their average total rent. It's the average TBRA support of their rent,
So what makes up the difference?
their own income.
They are
So it is an
actually-
income-based program, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And when Adam Trimble, and you can ask Adam this, I think HUD did a report on us like 2 or 3 years into it. And they said, man, you guys don't really give out a lot, because a lot of other organizations, especially up in Seattle, they give a lot of support. But we parse it out and we make sure that they're working for it. Because last thing we want is just another return. So,
So Frank, let me ask you a question aside from all of this. right
sure.
here. You stated that you've been doing this a long time, 2012.
No, 12, yeah.
Okay. And I see that you've got the numbers to
Mhm.
show, a low recidivism rate and the success stories that you have here.
Mhm.
But statistically, the numbers within our community and our state are not going down.
No, and you know why?
So I want to hear what your
Okay.
thought process.
Well,
is
it's
for that.
still being led in a state that believes in housing first. It's been a prolific problem since I started in 2012. As a matter of fact, I was warned about it when I came in because we had housing first coalitions. Probably the first 5 or 6 years we had it, and it was a big, heavy county push because it was a big state push. And it originally came, Dennis Culhane, I did some history on this. Dennis Culhane did a Gates Foundation study on veterans in a housing first model. Get them in a house, will they do better? this and that. Well, then they ended up flipping it over to the families and individuals instead of just having it approved for the veterans. And so then they started to run this single blanket method or methodology of saying, hey, you put them in a house, their, stress will go down and they'll start doing better. But it won't. Not when the brain is running off the rails, not when the structure of the families and the kids are running crazy. I mean, I sat here, but that's what it is. That's why this state sucks. I apologize, but I don't know if you know this, but in 2016, I ran for county commissioner. And one of the big deals was I was really anti-housing first. And we need to have a clean and sober drive to it. And so with that, we lost our funding from the county for like 3 or 4 years. I don't know if you know that, but we did. Gina, you might have been here during some of that, maybe?
Not so much. No, I
Okay,
think I
not so
came in
much. That was-
just after that.
But we lost our funding because I just didn't believe in that method. So, and that's why, because Maslow's hierarchy isn't just simplistic, it doesn't work that way. When you're working with people, you got generational stuff, you got physiological stuff that goes on, and life's hard for some people. They're born in a bad situation, but some, they create their bad situation. Nonetheless, God gives everyone an opportunity to recover, but you got to be able to do the work and make that decision, and the state doesn't believe that. Yeah. So the rapid rehousing that we have at CAP, the Community Action Program, that is a housing first. So we do have housing first model in Cowlitz County. And that funding there is used in that way. But this tenant-based rental assistance, we got high barrier, low barrier is, it was Hope Village. You guys know that we put in to do Hope Village, but they didn't want us to do UAs and certain things like that. So we said, well, we're not going to do that. We want to make sure they're progressing. So that, and Ralph DaCosta Nunez is out of Columbia University, which you think, boy, that's a very liberal university, but Ralph DaCosta Nunez heads up the Institute for Family Development, and he is interested most in families. And he said there's 3 categories. There's people that housing first is their only problem. Housing, maybe their rent went up out of their range. That's housing first. That might be 10% of the population that's homeless. But then the second layer is those vocational and educational. Maybe the market's changed and, media is totally different now and everything's turning different again. So people have to get re-educated, so they have to work on that. And then thirdly, which is the biggest category we see, is those with mental health, chemical dependency, generational poverty. And once again, we had our drug and alcohol statistics recently, and 85% of the youth families in their homes are using. 85% of the youth out of the 123, 85% their family members used. Now, you go to the adults, out of the 979, it was a little over 50%. In 2023, we did it 1 year, and it was 65%. But here's what we did, and I hate to say this, the top substance that leads people to intensive outpatient placement, for their IOP, the drug that drives them there, the adults, it was alcohol, number 1. Number 2 was meth. Number 3 was marijuana. Number 4, fentanyl. And we've got the numbers and the ages all diced out on a report. And this is a 24-25 blend. And the youth, the 123, guess what the top drug was or substance? Marijuana. There it is. What's number 2? Alcohol. So we're doing it to ourselves. We just added on and legalized and made it okay for marijuana. So now you see you went from a 50% used in the household to a 85% steadily, or 80 to 85. So we just shot ourselves in the foot because the high level of THC, and I'm glad Trump is actually exploring the defective part of THC. Because there's a lot of, maybe there's good measures to it for cancer and blah, blah, blah. But it's important to study what causes psychosis. Because there is a lot of high level THC stuff causing schizophrenia.
So,
Sorry for the long answer.
no, you said a lot there, and I want to try and stay focused on a couple of things.
Sure.
In your S-bar, I went through and read, and I'm not sure, it was for your teen to 25. Some of the things that you're talking about.
Oh, the 18 to 25-year-olds. Yeah. I pulled that out totally.
Yeah, but I want to address a
Yeah.
couple of things that you mentioned, and
Yeah.
the reason that I asked that question
Mm-hmm.
about what's causing this and where we're at. So, you talked about going about that program, helping people with life skills, being dependent, and the things that you went through and
Mm-hmm.
mapped out in there. And the problem that I see with that, and I commend your efforts in it, but the problem is that's what they should be learning at public school,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
right? Those are things that they should be learning in an institution that we're already paying taxes
That's
into
right.
that
Yeah.
is failing.
Amen.
And so now we're talking about spending more money in another organization,
Mhm.
taking taxpayer money to try to do the same thing that they should have been doing while they were in school for 12 years.
CPS,
Okay, 14.
juvenile
whatever it
detention,
is.
same
So-
thing.
So that portion of it, I agree with your comment about the housing first model not working, but I don't know that that's the problem. The problem
Yeah.
is, it's what you just, when you were talking about the drugs and the alcohol and the marijuana,
Mm.
the problem is that we have developed a system that is reactionary to all of those things.
Mhm.
And we're spending money to react to the
The foundation that's broken.
the foundation itself is what needs to be addressed, but we're not addressing
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
What we're doing is we're spending a lot of money in programs that there's a lot of organizations within just our county alone
Mhm.
that are all vying for the same money to do the same thing. And what they're doing is they're treating a symptom. They're not treating the problem.
Mhm.
And the problem is, as you just described, is that we live in a state where weed's legal.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go through.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and single moms is our largest family population, 70 to 80% every single year. Single moms,
So I look at that, and that's
no dads.
a societal breakdown
I know.
of
Yeah,
the traditional family.
yeah, I know.
And that's where I really think that one of the things, if we want to spend money, let's spend money on reinstituting traditional family values. Let's spend money on teaching people what it means to raise a family. I don't think that I don't know that there is a child doctor or psychologist in the world that would argue that a child being reared in a loving home with a loving mother and a
Mhm.
loving father is the optimal way to raise a child.
Right, yeah,
Regardless of what your
yeah,
political preferences on sexuality and all that other garbage,
right.
that's the optimal
It is.
place to rear a child.
You've heard of the elephant thing, right? The elephant study in Africa.
Mm-mm.
They were finding rhinos being stomped to death by herds of elephants. And this is back in the 70s. And so what they did is back then they did a study to find out what in the world's going on. And what ended up happening is people were poaching the big male elephants, and these testosterone enraged juvenile elephants were ganging up on these rhinos and stomping them to death. So you lost the bull elephant. You lost something that can establish a boundary. And boundaries are always a big deal. I'm
So
all
to
with you on
to
that.
That point, where I'm coming from is, I don't see creating more programs with more organizations and throwing more money at it as solving our problem. We're not addressing the root issue of what we're dealing with in the state.
Well, our nation too, you know, I mean,
As a society.
look
as
at
Americans.
what's going on. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
you're telling me, I mean, we adopted 5 kids and dad was deported, mom died. They, 2 years after we took the last 3 in, we see this recycled all the time, but you got to do something. And CPS, I would help CPS out with the emergency placement services like I offered them, because we got room. They said, a trans can make a decision on which side they want to sleep. And I said, no, I got girls that have been raped here. We're not going to put a guy on the girl's side. They said, well, that's what so we backed out. That kind of policy inhibits, some sort of progress. If we could get these kids, these young kids, straightened out and at least some of them on track, that ripple effect, you're going to cut down on the collateral damage of them having babies. At least the kids we adopted, Mari and Johnny, they haven't got their GED yet, but they haven't had kids. They haven't done loaded drugs. And yes, they've got their problems, but we've cut down on the collateral damage, and I think that's part of navigating little by little. It's kind of a biblical thing, little by little. And, I know, yeah, but we can't solve the world problems. We can only deal with the field that we plow. Right now, I see us doing a lot in the juvenile detention because we get the sheriff dropping off people at our house or at Best Place. We have them literally a fight in the home. They bring them to us. And it's considered okay. They're not breaking probation or anything. And I remember a judge saying, there's a lot of kids that are thrown into this institutional approach and you take on mannerisms, but you got to have an atmosphere where there's boundaries and there's values and, we're kind of acting as the father and the mother because we are parents to each one of those kids. And that's the complexity. I mean, we go to court. We sit there for hours. One's late to school, someone gets kicked out, we run and get him. Someone is doing transitional school, we're all over the place. But we're filling this gap that CPS literally is disgusting. I apologize, really. I mean, I just had it out with them the other day. So, yeah. Yep, I can only do what we do, and I'm getting tired, So, but this TBRA assistance will help. It will.
I was just, because I know we give cap money for rental assistance. Tell me the differences between the two.
Yeah, so that's one of the nuances with the grant that we'd have to look at. They don't call it TBRA, they don't call it tenant-based rental assistance, they call it rapid rehousing. So we'd have to kind of look at if there's changes in the program model and what that looks like there. So it's similar in that there's rent assistance available with supportive services. Folks are working on
And that
things.
is only available to like landlords or something, or? I mean, community house doesn't have the ability to tap into that?
Oh, we send people there.
Yeah, so if they had individuals, so we're talking primarily about folks who are HIN eligible. So if they're eligible for the Housing and Essential Needs Program, and get a housing referral. If community house is serving those individuals, then that could be the case. The issue, I think, is probably the timing in that, when folks are ready to leave community
Right.
house, they may not, we can't immediately connect them with a HIN housing referral. So that's probably the bigger issue is
Or
that timing.
HOSWA vouchers or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
There may not be openings at that time or what have you.
So the money, this money that you're asking for, this $50,000,
Mm-hmm.
it's set aside, it doesn't go into a general fund, it
No.
can be used for
no,
something else.
It's used specifically for them.
And only that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then there's 10%, I think. Well, that's not 10%, but whatever, for admin fees. Usually the city would allow 10% admin fees.
A de
but I
minimis
see
rate.
3,000's not there, so.
The city used to do it, but they don't want to do it anymore.
Well, they didn't have the money. Yeah, I think money was short because of Hope Village.
And did the money that the city gave you, do they have to be a Longview resident that was unhoused or what's the?
Well, I don't think that's the matter as much. If someone has a voucher, obviously, we help some with vouchers, but usually the golden goose egg, they get to live for free, right?
I don't know what the requirements were
But-
of the
But
TREF
the
funding.
city of Longview,
Yeah.
it's Kelso Longview, we, because a lot of them, you got to think Country Run, we'll do T-Bra assistance for them. Country Run's out in Lexington there. And
Who did-
that's the housing that was started in 1999, the late 90s, as a tax-based, they have to have 20 units set aside for low income. And so that's where we put a lot of the single moms out there. And then we'll go out there and pick them up and we have them after school and bring them back out there and keep close tabs with them to keep them on the straight and narrow, hopefully.
Are the guidelines required to qualify for this funding by the recipient? Who sets that?
We set it when we proposed it to the city. We said, hey, we want it to be clean and sober approach. And they agreed, so I was like, that's great.
So the subsidy is determined based on their income. You determine. if
It's
you
a
make
30%, yeah, it's the 30% of their,
So
yeah.
it just makes up the 30% for their housing out of their
Yeah,
income.
yeah. So it might be $500, you could see the level there. If I had my housing person, she could give you the breakdown of everything. 'Cause she's got it all mapped out.
Is there a limitation of time as to how long somebody can be receiving that funding? 'Cause I know some of the other ones you can only get it one time and or
Right.
for a certain amount of time. So somebody could be on this for 5 years.
No,
No.
gosh, no, not even close. Maybe a year, 2 max, but we do a year at a time. We'll commit to a year at a time and then we titrate. We don't want them to become dependent. We need them to be self-sufficient. Yeah.
What do you do to help them with the limited available housing that we have in our area and the fact that their job, they may not increase their income to the point where they can, after a year's time, move into somewhere that's affordable for them?
Well, we have, for one thing, we just work on those 2-year transitional housing. If they come back to us, they know that they have to start from ground zero. So it behooves them to make their own way or they're gonna just be working hard for it. But sometimes that has to happen because laziness is another component to, someone ended up homeless. And there's some low IQs. And there's also a lot of autism. We're seeing a ton of autism. So you take a mom that is a CNA and she has a kid that keeps getting kicked out of school and she gets called away from work, she's gonna end up back at the shelter. So you gotta come up with a system in order to help her. And like you said, the schools are but they're not it's tough. It's just not easy stuff. You know, there's some complexities that, you know, there's always gonna be. But we're not the fix-all for the history of time. We try to stabilize them, get them out there. So we're not asking for you guys to make some sort of decision. I just wanted to put this out there.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
But I think I understand it. I just want to know the difference between cap and this. I do have a general question, and it's basically just for my own information, and it stems from because when Longview closed Hope Village,
Mhm.
I believe there was a report of and I don't know where this is at, if it's been dropped or whatever, a gal was suing the city of Longview
Yeah,
for
I
taking
saw
away her
that.
house.
Yeah.
So then it just begs the question, how much do you guys deal with that? I mean, what comes your way or what kind
COVID,
of things are you dealing with?
we get lots of threats, but you know, honestly, we've only been, COVID kind of harvested a mentality, you know, to where if someone falls and they get hurt, they get money and so we got a pretty good lawyer and we're pretty protected. We haven't, you know, they know that they'll never get allowed in the community house again if they start doing that. So, I mean, gosh, we're allowing them to live there for free as long as they're working on the recovery. So we've had about 3 cases and we don't get hit with that kind of thing. You know, that's, there's an agency in legal that does lawsuits regularly to the city of Longview. You know, and we're fortunate. We have them signed. We do everything. You know, I even went to Northwest Justice one time and I said, hey, if I say they have to save 80% of their income, do they have to? Could we ask their bank statements? They said, absolutely. If they sign, yeah. So that's, yeah.
Well, so on that point, and Doug just walked in, so he's gonna hear me ask this, so I'm glad.
Mhm.
Is there, you said that they're living there for free, but they're not because we're paying for it.
Yeah.
They're not paying for it. but we
They're
are,
not paying
the
for it.
taxpayer is.
Yeah.
So is there some sort of
Well,
a service component?
I
that
don't
you're
know.
tied
I
into
wouldn't
it?
say taxpayer. Yeah, they are supposed to have volunteer hours and they all got chores.
Well, if the
They, everyone's
taxpayer-
got chores.
If it's coming
and-
from Medicaid or from us, it's
Well,
coming from the taxpayer.
okay, so,
That's-
yeah, I
that's-
guess if you want to look at it that way, but I'm not asking, you know, we're getting from people that are tithing, or not tithing, but they were, you know, it's an offering.
Sure. Well,
I-
no, I'm just saying to your point about
Yeah.
that. I think a lot of that comes from, to the chairman's question, that
Mhm.
entitlement that you're talking
Oh,
about
yeah,
is one that we allow.
yeah. Well, they're gonna have to work for it. That's why there's a low recidivism rate.
A service,
You know what I mean?
clause attached to it that, hey, you have to
Yeah.
do X, Y, and Z
Yeah.
as a restitution to.
Well, you saw, there's 108, if you look at this one sheet, there's 108 people that didn't make it. The involuntary exits. And so every year, there's a little over 100 people or families that consisted of people that ended up getting exited or exited themselves, whether it's drug abuse, curfew, bad behavior or violence. And then participation. They've got to participate. And you can see 25% participation. If they're not going to participate, they go. Because we got people that are open and willing that want the help. There's honestly, guys, if you look anywhere else in the state, you're not going to find this. And you might think, oh yeah, right, Frank, but just you check around, you know.
How long can somebody stay in the system under TBRA?
Sorry? Oh, it's like 1 or 2 years. Like I said, Steve, we titrate it down. So it might be like $500 a month and it might be $200 a month and, you know, so we spread it out. We don't give a lot of money to just a few. And I think that report does show it, but, you know, Gina, I can always give her her stats. I don't care. You know, although some people say, oh, that's confidentiality, we can blot out the names, but it's not health records.
I appreciate all the info.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Doug, can I ask you a question? On lawsuits, kind of piggyback on Commissioner Rader, if we, and any type of lawsuit involving an agency that we send money to, whether it's somebody suing them because they're not letting them stay there, or there's an employee interaction or anything, if we give money to it, do we run the risk, or is it low of being named in something like that because we contribute funds? There's probably always a risk. I'm just trying to.
Sure. It really comes down to what the factual connection and legal connection is between the county and the entity. The closer that connection, the more infused the county is to its operations and responsibilities of oversight, the greater the risk. So I'm not aware of what the subject matter was, but that would be what, a question to our office, and the analyses would be is what's the entity, what's its role, is it an extension of the county's services or functions? Does the county have a responsibility of oversight and monitoring? Those are questions that are answered on a case-by-case basis.
Well, and it gets me thinking about these type of things, and to be honest with you, because of the juvenile system, where the court said, we're not gonna have any, you can go back as far as you want, or any kids that say they've been abused, and we're seeing that play out in our state right now. And so I always worry about at some point in time, how do we kind of protect ourselves so that kind of decision doesn't come down and all of a sudden we're responsible for what happened, may have happened 10 years ago.
Sure. And that's part of the metric is when you sit down to make decisions on funding a third party, including whether it can be a vendor even, whether the county's utilizing a vendor to perform a service or provide an improvement or something. What's the level of county's responsibility and monitoring, which is why we go through, a lot of effort and sometimes a progression of arguments with the vendor and as to our indemnification and defense and hold harmless language. And sometimes we advise the county to just walk away, find another vendor. So again, it's on a case-by-case basis, and to answer your question, the matter you've been talking about, that's something, vet it with our office, have that discussion and make an informed decision.
Gina, those type of contracts, when we do with the state and stuff, does Doug and them get to see those? So, okay.
And in a situation like this, Doug, don't know if it would or not, but would joint and several come into play if there was a lawsuit against us with a vendor type situation?
It depends on the wording of, the county can't escape all liabilities simply because of court decisions and statute. And so you have within our hold harmless indemnification and defense language, to the extent phrase like to the extent permitted at law. So it becomes a little bit more difficult with public agencies because the courts have held you can't shift your responsibilities wholly onto another public agency. You each have your own ground. So that's why when we contract oftentimes with the state, and you've seen that as well, is basically we mutually agree to indemnify and defend each other to the extent of our own respective liabilities and obligations of law, something of that nature. So does that answer your question? And that's something that we've negotiated with the state. So our language of state agrees to indemnify us for this, we agree to indemnify the state for that. The two sections of the language are virtually identical. Everybody's responsible for their own errors and omissions and negligence.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Shelley?
Shelley Pierce, Risk and Safety Manager, requesting 30 minutes for our quarterly executive session to review liability claims.
How many minutes did you say? I'm
30
sorry.
minutes.
30 minutes?
Yes, please.
And I think this is,
And I
This
think
is
there's
our
ones
last
right
thing.
after, I believe there's an executive session right after this as well.
okay. Did we have any other business today? Because this will probably be the end of it after the executive sessions. Okay, we'll go back 30 minutes.
The board is extending the executive session an additional 10 minutes until 3:50. Board is extending the executive session an additional 10 minutes until 4 p.m. The board is extending the executive session an additional 15 minutes until 4:15.
Okay, back from executive session, no actions taken. I
Yeah.
think that should be it.